My union, RMT, opposes the UK's membership of the EU because it has a negative impact on industry and for workers. Our members have seen the impact of EU policies of liberalisation, deregulation and privatisation, which have devastated industries including the UK's coal and steel sectors. The Tory Prime Minister John Major broke up and privatised British Rail with disastrous results. This is just one example of the bonfire public services demanded by the EU in the name of profit. As a public service union, how can we support this EU-led carve-up? The EU has promoted the undercutting of wages and the social dumping of cheap labour, leading to the decimation of UK seafaring jobs. The same is happening in the offshore energy industry. EU directives also undermine our trade union collective bargaining rights. Some argue we should stay and fight for something better, but the EU is beyond reform. The idea of a social Europe is a myth. For all these reasons, RMT is calling for a vote to leave.
Mick Cash of the RMT there. And one of his colleagues, Alex Gordon, joins me now. And we're also joined by Kath Spate of the GMB Union, who is a Remain campaigner. Welcome to both of you. Alex Gordon, the TUC General Secretary, Francis O'Grady, is warning in a speech today that there will be less money available to fund the NHS if the UK votes to leave the EU. That is a warning that has been reiterated by the Chief Executive of the NHS, Sir Simon Stevens. So what assurances can you give that there will still be enough public money for what is a very costly public service?
It's a very costly public service, and it's a service that we're very proud of, and most people in this country want to invest in through their taxes. The danger to the NHS comes from remaining in the European Union and from the threat of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, the EU-US trade deal. That will open up the NHS for private healthcare companies from America.
What evidence do you have it will do that?
It's absolutely clear from the leaks which have been made, the very few leaks that have been made from the proceedings in the negotiations, that that is the agenda of the American negotiators.
We haven't signed up to that deal yet.
We haven't, but of course it's been done in secrecy, so no one really knows what the American corporations are after, but we know that they're not here for charity.
Right, Kath Spate, what do you say on the argument around TTIP, this partnership between the EU and the US, because many of Labour supporters and union supporters are very worried about it?
We are very worried. We're working very hard with the Labour MEPs to make sure that public services are exempt from TTIP and that our services are protected. But Alex's argument, if we believe that a Brexit vote would make our NHS and public services safer, with a Tory government, with probably Boris or Michael Gove in charge, the Tory government are already privatising the NHS by stealth. And if we think a Brexit vote will be safer and the NHS will be safer in a Tory government's hands, then it's...
Well, they of course, will claim they're not privatising it by stealth and that actually it was opened up under a Labour government initially to some sort of competition. But on Kath's point, broader point, why do you think the NHS would be safer, particularly with a British government that could be a Conservative government that you wouldn't support?
Well, the NHS isn't safe in Tory hands,
right.
But of course the best way to make sure it's not in Tory hands is to vote to come out of the European Union.
Why? They say they're going to spend more money. I mean, we've heard the Vote Leave campaign saying that they would use the money that goes to the EU and they'll spend it on the NHS.
Well, that's a very fine promise, but let's be clear, this is a Conservative government with a majority of 12. They're deeply, deeply split, irrevocably split. If we vote to come out of the European Union, Cameron is out of office, he'll be sacked by his own party and we'll have a general election.
Right.
That's the best opportunity to save the NHS.
Right, well, you heard it here first. Now, I mean, a clear message from Labour figures like John McDonnell are saying that actually a Tory Brexit would impose further austerity cuts. It would be workers who would suffer because the economy would shrink and there would be a loss of workers' rights. Is the Shadow Chancellor wrong?
I think he is wrong, yes. I mean, the fact is that austerity is the programme of the European Commission and the European Union. They have driven it relentlessly from Greece to Portugal and every country in between. Britain is not exempt from EU austerity measures just because we're not part of the Eurozone. We still have to be part of the Stability and Growth Agreement, and we have to follow the recommendations from the European Commission issued every November. So Britain is facing austerity because of EU policies and EU directives.
Right, what do you say to that? Well, the example of Greece is obviously clear to everybody. They screamed austerity.
Let's not forget, the UK is the 5th largest economy in the world. And to say that we can be compared with Greece, is a bit silly. Austerity is a political will. It was the political will of the coalition government and now the Tory government to impose austerity. Austerity doesn't go you know, to the very richest. It's the very poorest in our country who have paid for austerity. You know, when you can give tax cuts to the very richest people in the country and then take £30 a week from disabled people.
So what's the EU doing then? I mean, you're talking about here about national politics. So what's your argument for remaining in the EU to protect those people that you say have suffered as a result of austerity?
Well, the EU needs changing. It needs reforming. We're not saying in GMB that the EU is perfect and we've got to stay in it. We want to stay in it to reform it. We want a social Europe that looks after workers, whether they're in the UK or in Spain or in Germany or anywhere else, and that looks after the most vulnerable in society.
Do you think workers or British wages have been depressed, kept lower because of people coming from EU countries?
Well, when a business can go to Romania or any other of the Eastern European countries and advertise jobs there before they're being advertised in this country, then yes, that's why you put in worker against worker.
Why do you want to stay in the EU?
Well, we're already looking at reform now. The Commission have agreed to look at the Posting of Workers Directive, which means that a worker coming from another part of the EU can be paid what they would have been paid in their own country instead of being paid what they should be paid in this country. So we're looking for an even playing field, and therefore it's the exploiters that we should go after, not the people who are being exploited.
Let's look at sterling, Alex Gordon, because you retweeted on June the 11th that sterling fell by more than 1% against the dollar as traders absorbed the latest independent poll showing the country moving towards a vote for leave. And you're on record saying that a fall in the pound would be a good thing. Why?
The pound's overvalued. It makes exports very, very unaffordable. The fact is that the current exchange rate of the pound is set for the interests of the City of London and the banks that want cheap money washing in and out. The interests of people in Britain, ordinary people in Britain, is not the same as the interests of the banks. We should have a healthy manufacturing sector, and that would be assisted by a fall in the value of the pound.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you both very much.
Yeah.